the recording is now started. So we've had a lot of questions about 3D and getting into 3D and sort of the different ways and different programs there are for 3D. So we actually are doing a more 3D focused quarter because it's such a kind of mysterious thing for anyone outside of ITGM and animation, since I know those majors are definitely pretty closely tied to using 3D just because of their pipelines. But for people like illustration and Sequa, we often actually never touch or see 3D for some reason, and so for that purpose, we have today's meeting. So this is the intro to Blender. The first half will be a talk, and then I'll do a probably a really rough demo. But let's jump in. So why are having skills in 3D important? The main thing and the main reason why I really want to push people to at least get a little bit familiar with 3D is because jobs are constantly asking for it. Now I know most of these are senior positions, but it's kind of tricky. So some of them put them in the tags, uh, like this one says digital 3D, but sometimes they only put it in this little like skill requirements thing. So like Ubisoft is looking for it, character concept artists are looking for it. It says digital 3D, digital 2D. It says knowledge of digital painting and a 3D software. Again, looking at a different concept art section of Ubisoft again, digital 3D, knowledge of painting in 3D. If we look at Lilith games, digital 3D. I also did notice that for some reason, environment artists, they like to say like solely 3D. So if you're looking at environment art, that's super important for you to kind of have under your belt. And also, even if a job isn't asking for it, it's a really good skill to have because you can get kind of a leg up on competition because you can quickly block things out, and you can also really quickly kind of cheat perspective, especially if it's like a super complex scene. Again, digital 3D, environment artists again, digital 3D, asset creation, it's all down here. This is actually asking for more, so it's Maya, Photoshop, ZBrush, Substance, and more. This is FreeJam, digital 3D, and this is also a digital 3D game. So my assumption is if it's a 3D product or game they're producing, they're more likely to be heavier in 3D. This is, I don't actually know, I don't know who this studio is, but they say digital 3D. So this is actually one of the ones that kind of hides it, I believe, in here, because if you look in their tabs, they just say art direction, concept art, environment design, but here in their software, they're asking for Unreal, Houdini, and Maya. Yeah, proficiency in Photoshop and 3D software. So it's like you kind of have to hunt for it sometimes. So again, it helps you get a leg up on the competition. This is specifically tailored for Blender. So Blender is actually entirely free. I believe it's an open source software. Someone can yeet me if that is completely wrong. But there's actually, I think, 2 or 3 ways to download it. I personally downloaded it through Steam because I like tracking my time and I like to see how much of a no-life I am. But you can also download it through their website, and I'm sure there's a few other places. Again, it's fast and easy to block out things. It answers those like basic form questions super quickly, and you can get a higher level of detail quicker if you're not super familiar with perspective. The other really nice things that come with it, like Ali said about Maya, is you can set up a lot of lights, and you can change colors of lights, and you can quickly move those lights around if they're not working how you want them to be. So that's a really nice thing, and it takes the guesswork out of how does this shadow bounce here, or how does this light go across the surface here. So that can help you solve those issues a lot faster. They're a lot faster than hand drawing everything in perspective. I mean, if you're an artist like Atkins who just knows perspective and you're crazy good at it, then maybe it's not a little bit faster. But it also adds a higher initial detail starting point because your basic form is already there, so all you have to do is do the small details over top, or maybe make some minor edits to how the form is. For blockouts too, you can also set up colors and textures, although if you don't already have the assets for that, that might be a little bit more of a time sink. It's just depending on like what you're going for. But for concept art, you don't super need that. So it could also be a time waster in some aspects. Um, and then another thing is, I know a lot of studios ask for Maya, but I know at least from like Ethan's experience, for anyone who knows Ethan Salmon, he's currently doing an Imagineering internship. He actually is allowed to work in Blender, and then anytime they need something in Maya, they just turn that Blender into a Maya file. I'm sure there's a little bit more to it, but you can use Blender for a lot of things that Maya does. But again, this is focused towards concept art. If you're an animation major and you're looking specifically at 3D animation, Maya is probably the better move, just because that is more industry standard as of now than Blender. So now that we got that out of the way, getting started. So there's loads and loads of ways that you can approach Blender. So these are just like some simple ones that I found while I was searching or what people recommended to me. And these aren't just like the only ones out there. There's countless others from countless other versions of Blender. And they're all good in their own different ways. It's just kind of up to how you learn and what you need in your tool set. And just because one tutorial doesn't work doesn't mean another won't work. So it's kind of, you have to figure out what works for you. Like, I know a lot of my friends have said the Blender donut tutorial was absolutely awful and they would never use it or recommend it ever to a beginner. But I learned how to do basic blockouts and stuff from the Blender donut tutorial. So it's all kind of just up to how you work and what you're looking for. So moving kind of into the tools you need, the best place to start is getting comfortable with the Blender UI. And it's kind of like Photoshop, where you open it and you immediately kind of just throw up in your mouth because of how crazy the UI looks. And you have all these different workspaces, and it's very intimidating because there's a bunch of buttons, and those buttons change when you move to a different thing. So get used to like moving around. What are all the different ways to move around? And just because someone does it one way doesn't mean there's not a different way to do it, because there's countless different ways to solve the same problem, similar to Maya. So these are kind of the best like tools, I guess, and keys that hotkeys for starters. So the main thing is moving around the workspace. If you Okay, another thing to point out is if you have a mouse that only has left click and right click, you're not going to have a fun time in Blender. Make sure you have I think it's like a 3-key mouse where you can like click the middle mouse button and hold it and move stuff. That's super helpful because a lot of moving around in Blender is based around having a middle mouse. So anytime I say middle mouse, it's clicking that middle mouse and then doing the other action. So for example, moving and then you move the mouse will make you rotate kind of around in the space. If you press shift and then you middle mouse click and then you move it, that moves you in and out or left and right depending on which way you do it. If you just middle mouse click and then you move your mouse, that rotates you just around the object. I'm sorry if this is really confusing. I'll actually show it in the demo part for anyone who's a more visual learner. If you also do the control key, I'm not sure what it is for Mac because I hate Mac and I avoid it, so I'm assuming it's like command. So it's control for Windows and middle mouse, and then you like move the mouse up and down. That zooms you in and out. You can also just use the scroll wheel, but sometimes the middle mouse control is a little bit more precise if you're in like super close to your thing. Other hotkeys that are important are space. So if you're doing like a table turnaround or anything, or you have any animations in your Blender file, that'll start the timeline moving from wherever that little timeline cursor is. Usually it starts at 1. If you want to add an object, like a simple mesh to your thing, all you have to do is you press Shift A, and then it opens a little like menu, and then you can select from NURBS basic meshes, various other things. R is important because that's how you rotate an object in the space. And a lot of these are the same for when you're in edit mode, when you're editing the actual vertices on that object. S means you scale the object, G, you can move object, and uh, this kind of gets into object manipulation. So if you don't want that just basic mesh and you want to do more to it, you can press tab, and that takes you from the object mode, which is where you generally start in a workspace, and then it moves you into the edit node or edit mode, and it'll show you kind of all the little vertices on your object. And depending on your subdivisions, it'll have more or less. We can get into that later. But in edit mode, again, S is to scale. Also, if you press, so there's an XYZ axis in the 3D space. So if I press S and then I press X, that means it only scales that object on that axis, which can be really helpful for setting up things like walls or floors. G is a move node, or it moves it. If you middle click your mouse while you're in move mode, it'll show you kind of the axes, and then you can choose to move your object just straight on that axis. And there's a lot more hotkeys. These are just simple basic ones that are helpful. And just some like best practices, please make sure, so like in your workspace, you have the XYZ, the basic axis, and then you have like that central point. Try and keep your object centered across that central point as best as you can, because the thing that Blender doesn't tell you is certain axes are favored when it comes to the modifier. So if you're doing like a bend, like a simple deform bend modifier, that gets really funky if you're not on the right axis, and also mirroring gets really difficult if you're not on that base axis area. So again, some modifiers are relative to certain axes, so sometimes you have to fiddle with them. Like I know I always struggle with the simple deform because it's, I think, relative to the Z axis, and then if you change settings, it gets all funky and weird sometimes. When you're starting out, start with box modeling is my recommendation, or some people call it poly modeling, I believe. And then when you're doing that, you always want to keep your body parts separate. I find it easier to keep my body parts separate because you can non-destructively add those parts and merge those parts later if need be. And it's just a little bit easier for me to kind of keep them separate and then merge them when I need them, rather than having them all together and go, oh crap, I need this to be separate for this reason, and then having to figure out how to pull it away from that mesh. Another thing is start simple. Keep your topology simple and as low as you can until you absolutely need those extra kind of polygons to make things work. And this is mostly a useful tip for people who are working on lower end computers, because the more you're telling the computer add polygon, add polygon, add polygon, the higher density those polygons are, the more your computer sort of chugs, because your computer has to mathematically render all of those in its computer brain. So try and keep your poly divisions as low as possible until you can't anymore or it's necessary to raise them. And that's mostly important with sculpting. Sculpting throws like all of these out the window because sculpting is a strange beast that's completely different than box modeling. So I would recommend, if anyone is wanting to start out, don't look at sculpting videos. It gets really complicated with like how subdivisions are and how many you need and kind of all that junk. So if you heard me say any words and you immediately went, oh god, what is that? I have no clue what it is. These are some kind of base vocab for it. So topology is in reference to the mesh of an object, and pretty much all a mesh is it's just a bunch of squares or triangles depending on where you're focusing, and it's just the distribution of those vertices, edges, and faces on that model. So if something has a super lot, like you're in millions of subdivisions and you have millions of polygons, then that's a high topology, versus like a square that's not subdivided and only has like 6 sides, that's low poly. Box modeling is in reference to where you use the primitive shape. So like, say I start with a cube, and then I start editing those points to make the cube do what I want. That's box modeling or poly modeling. UVs are kind of something I haven't touched on yet. They're not super important for concept art blocking out, but pretty much what it is you take the mesh that's on your object, so you take all those polygons, and then you unfold them into sort of a 2D representation of that object. And this is super important if you are trying to texture your model. Something that's not super important for us is NURBS. It's pretty much just an acronym for non-uniform rational B-splines, and it's just a different 3D representation of geometry. I've been told if you're trying to like 3D print anything or like machine anything, avoid the hell out of NURBS because they don't play well with those programs, and they're really super hard to kind of get ready for printing or, doing anything with them. Next is vertex or vertices. Hey, Math 100. It's all those little points on your object. Yay. Again, high poly versus low poly. If it's a high res model, it has a lot of polygons. It's high poly. It's the density of the polygons on the surface. Next is a scene. So a scene references what you're looking at. It's the entire workspace and viewer that you're sort of looking at. That includes objects, the model you're making, lights, cameras, and anything else you throw in that scene. Rendering is something you'll kind of hear thrown around. It's kind of the final end product of what this thing will be. And so if you're into like miniatures or anything, a lot of times when you buy like a 3D STL, it'll have a render, and that's just kind of showing people what it's supposed to be like. For animations, it's kind of like everything, like the lighting, the textures, everything together, is my understanding. Next, texture is just pretty much the material of things on the model. There's multiple ways to kind of go about it. You can have pre-generated ones where a node is telling it what to do, or you can have more like 2D textures affecting those things. And next is the origin. It's a little orange dot that appears on your model when you have objects selected, and I can show that when we actually get into the demo. So these are just a few examples of blockouts and sculpts. This is actually a Maya model by Ali, but just kind of showing how simple they can be. You do not have to go this advanced. I was mostly trying to cheat my way out of doing perspective drawing because I suck at it. So this was an example of an interior I made, and I made this just learning from the Blender donut tutorial blockout. I've also gone on and I've sculpted a few critters. So this is my Pip Pip. I learned particle systems and stuff for it. His topology is kind of a mess, but something else is I was looking more sculpting. So this is another critter I did. So there's a lot of things you can do with Blender. Start simple. Again, start with box modeling because sculpting is an entirely different beast with different skill sets and tools. And make sure you keep your subdivision simple. And the less things you have in a scene, the easier things usually go. So next, the most important thing is once you kind of get comfortable with manipulating shapes and you get used to the workspace, do your research. So for example, for this Pip Pip, I looked into how do you make particle systems with feathers? How do you make feathers in the first place? How do you do stylized hair or stylized fur in this case? How do different normal maps work? What do other 3D models do that I can do for this character? And then from there, once I kind of had those questions, I just looked up like stylized hair, and then I found a bunch of different things. Hair particle system, I found a bunch of things. How do you do UVs? How do I do, all these different things? And it's important to kind of distill down what the info you need is. So like a lot of videos were mentioning for the particle system, you need to have an HDRI because it helps with seeing how those are interacting in the space. So I had to look at what an HDRI is and how do I import that. And it's just kind of like a long line of just research that you end up doing to get an output. So for another example, I'm sorry if anyone's arachnophobic, I forgot to put that in here. So I was looking at how do spider legs connect? You know, how do other miniature creators make their design choices and what works to be printed in 3D, since I was looking at getting this guy printed. And then this was kind of my research, like how do you build out a scene? How do custom normal maps work? How do I make this feather look more realistic without poly modeling it? And just kind of all those weird niche things I figured out along the way. So let's start with a simple demo. So I'm going to switch to Blender. Can everyone see the Blender? Are we good? So again, I made this off the back of the Blender Donut tutorial, and for the Blender Donut tutorial, there's like 15 or 16 videos in that playlist. You only really need like the first 4, unless you care about geometry nodes and sprinkles. So like, I learned how to, let's see if it crashes. Okay, so as you can see, I put custom lights in here because I need to figure out how 3 light sources are going to bounce around the space. And I did kind of do some research on like how to do like some fabric sims, so I didn't have to completely model this hammock and stuff like that. But the easiest way I would say to approach it is to make your base room. If it's a square room, just keep it on the XYZ axis, don't turn it weird. And then make your prop fully model that prop, and then rotate it and move it after you have it modeled. So to kind of jump in, so this is what your first workspace looks like. So zooming in and out, I'm using my mouse wheel. This is the shift middle click, so it moves you kind of around the space. Control and then the middle click to kind of pan, so I'm sure you can see maybe the little bit difference. So you kind of, this is a little bit slower so you can control it more. Just straight middle mouse click. And then just to answer some questions, this weird little bobble thing you see here, this is your light. They throw it in any general sort of setting. Can I, okay. So as you can see, this is our light source. It's creating kind of these lights and shadows on our cube. That doesn't super matter right now. And then this is your camera. So if you have a scene, and so let's say I wanted this camera to be maybe a little bit zoomed out or moved completely. So one way to move your camera is if you press the shift and grave sign, and then that kind of puts you in this free move state. Oh, where'd the cube go? Oh, there's the cube. So if you use your WASD, and then Q pulls you down, E moves you up, and then once you have it kind of set where you want it, you can just left click, and then bam, your camera is set. So that camera won't move until I move it. Let's get into a little bit of poly modeling or box modeling. So pressing tab to enter your edit mode. So you can see all the little vertices on this. So let's say I want to scale this to make a floor. So I'll press S, and then because I want to edit it and make it, you know, more flat, I'll press Z after pressing S, and then you see this blue line showing up. So this is it telling you, hey, I'm moving on this axis. And then you can just move it how you want it. And then, so now let's say I want to scale it just normally. Bang, you have your floor. So that was just S and then moving my mouse. Another important thing is these little buttons. If you can see my little mouse, these buttons are super helpful. So like, let's say I only wanted, like, this floor is too high now. It's too thick. I don't want it that thick. There's multiple ways to go around this. So I want to select this top face right here. So what you can do is you can either do just the straight face mode and then click it, and so this is now selected. Or you can do, say it's like a different model that's not just a square, you can use this kind of edge. This is the edge. So if you press Alt on your keyboard and then click an edge, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay. This is probably a bad example, but say this is a tube and I wanted to select all around that tube and I didn't want to click all the way around that tube. I could just press Alt and then click and it'll give me that kind of loop that goes around that tube. So anyways, moving into that, so I want to move this down. Some videos will tell you to extrude it. I have found extruding can be a little bit funky if you're moving an object into an object itself. So I will press G to move this. I will hold my middle mouse button, and as you can see, it kind of like freaks out a little bit until you get it snapped to the right axis. Blender, so if I just click and release it after getting it set on that axis from middle click, then it scales just on that. So I press G, middle mouse to get it on the Z axis, and then you just left click, and then it's just there, it's set. So if I wanted to make some walls, I would press Shift A. It opens this little mesh menu, and I want a cube. So now, so the cube always kind of pop, or like your objects will always pop in at this little kind of, it's called a 3D cursor, and you can see that little orange, little orangeness in the middle of it. That's just saying that is this object's like origin point. So like if I rotate it, it's gonna rotate around where that origin is. So like for example, if we do this, there's ways to move the origin, like the 3D cursor in origin. So like let's say I wanted to rotate this thing just around this point. There's several ways to do it. The easiest way that I find to do it is you do so you select the point, object, set origin. So I press tab to enter into object mode because that's how you move the origin. You can move, or wait, hold on. Sorry, I'm a little out of practice with this. Here, let's just move the, so if you want to move your little 3D cursor, you can just shift right click and it'll move it to kind of the top plane of whatever you're hovering over. So like let's say I want to move it there. Tab to exit edit mode, object, set origin, and then you can set the origin of that object to that 3D cursor. And then this comes in use with like rotation. So if I want to just rotate stuff around that point, you can also go in and manipulate your rotations and movements just through this. So like let's say I want to be really precise and I wanted to move it around the Z axis 90 degrees only, and it'll just do that for you. So going back. Also, if you ever get your 3D cursor in a place that you do not want it and you want it recentered at this central area, Control or is it Shift C? It's Shift C, and it'll zoom you out for some reason, but it resets it again at that origin. So back to doing. Oh, okay. So another important thing is if you're in edit mode and you add a mesh. So like let's say I add let's add a UV sphere. And so because I'm not in edit mode. Oh my god, this is so scuffed. I'm so sorry. Okay. So if you want your objects to be completely separate from each other, make sure you exit into object mode when you add an object, otherwise it'll be all the same object. So like this one I can move independently because I put it down in object mode, whereas this one, as you can see, has two meshes. It has this square and this square. You can also mask select points by click dragging, by left click, holding, and dragging. So like let's say I want another sphere in here. Because I'm in edit mode, the sphere, I'm a dummy. Hold on. I always add circles when I mean spheres. So like, even if I move this sphere up here, right? Because all of these were created in the edit mode, even if I exit, and because this is separate, because it was in that edit mode, they're all connected. which can be useful in some aspects. I find it to be a little bit troubling when they're all on the same thing together. Uh, and it's super easy way to kind of get rid of them if you don't mean to do that is to select the faces, and then you can just delete it. Now when you delete something, there's a lot of different options. Vertices get rid of all the little points. Edges get rid of those sort of lines. Faces. I don't usually use these. I'm sure they have their own niche uses. What I mostly use what I do is I mostly use these ones. So if you have a really complex mesh and you have just like that one little point that's messing something up and you don't want it there, you can dissolve that vertice and then it'll just change the polygons to kind of it just kind of removes it. If you completely delete a vertice, sometimes it'll delete faces and sometimes you don't want to delete faces. That's getting into a little bit more of the technical side. We just want to get rid of the vertices. So now exiting into object mode, I'm going to get rid of this sphere. If I shift A, I want to, nope, hold on. Okay, we got our cube in and it's not connected to the other one. Huzzah! Press G, middle mouse click, move it over. I want it like there-ish. Enter edit mode. So this is the x-axis, which is the red one. So S, S, X, and then scale that. Also, if you're noticing that scale gets a little bit funky, I always start my mouse away from that kind of origin point because, so S. I find it a little bit easier to control because if your mouse is like right here and you're just the slightest movement makes it move a lot more. So if you're trying to be precise, pull it out here and then press that button. So there are a few helpful tips that I can add. Let me just get this in place. So like right there. So one way to kind of expand this, if I go back into vertice mode, is select these, press G, middle mouse, and then extend them out this way. The reason why I'm not using extrusion is, let's use extrusion. So extrusion is E, and then the nice thing is it kind of auto locks it to the rotation that it's at from where you're going. But as you see, it creates this edge loop, which can be not what you want if you want it to be like flat and straight, because that's another point that you have to move in order to kind of get the shape you want. Whereas if I just move it with the move tool, which is G, I don't have that weird little edge loop. So like if I wanted this to be like a weird triangular house, I don't have to deal with that middle point or like guess where I need to put it to make this look straight. So there are some advantages to using extrusions versus move tool, but move tool is usually your friend when you're just starting out until you're certain you have no choice but to sort of use extrusions. And I mean, extrusions have their own place, like if you're making like little feet on a table or something, then you might find some use there. So now if I want to extrude this up, G, middle mouse, bam. Now if you want to duplicate a shape, all you have to do is select the shape you want to duplicate and then do Shift D. And there are other keys you can click. So like, let's say you want to duplicate a shape but you don't want it to move, and say you accidentally moved your mouse, all you have to do is right click and then that shape is now within this other shape. And that's useful. So like, let's say I don't want this to move and I just want to rotate it 90 degrees. Bam. There, it's a little bit faster sometimes if you do stuff like that. So again, moving it with G. Now, if you're someone who likes to work with multiple views of your objects, so you're not constantly going like, left side, right side, top, bottom, yes, there is a way to split your workspace in Blender. So if you look here, so if you see my mouse, if you go to kind of this intersection area, it turns into a little plus sign. If you want to add another workspace like viewer to your area, you right click and then it'll pull up, do you want to horizontally split it or do you want to vertically split it? Or do you want to join or swap areas? So like let's say I want to split it vertically. I'll click that and then you see this kind of white line appear. You just left click and then bam, you have another workspace. And this becomes super useful. So like let's say I'm texturing. I can sit in texture paint and as you see, some of these workspaces have their own sort of dedicated things. But like, let's say I want to view the model here, and then I want to view like a shader editor. There's nothing in here because I haven't made textures, or like image editor, or compositor, you know. So you can have multiple views open. And the nice thing is, when you switch workspaces, it keeps your layouts. So like this was set to layout, that was that. So you can kind of set your workspaces up in different ways to kind of speed up your process a little bit. So like let's say this is front view. Wow, that tells you a lot, doesn't it? And then if I want to split again, I can horizontally split it. And so like let's say I wanted to horizontally split this one. You can edit the size of space by kind of hovering. It's kind of like resizing a browser. So like let's say I want this to be a top view. And these are real time. So like let's say I add another cube. Look, you can see your cube everywhere. So let's see. Let's think of something. Let's put a bed in here. So kind of just pulling that out. So that's kind of bed shaped. That might be a little bit tall for a bed. There is also kind of a helpful thing. So if I am sitting in object mode, this tells you how big your model is. So like right now it's 5, this is X, so it's 5 meters wide. It is 6.27 meters tall, and then I forget. Oh wait, is it? Oh, okay. So the funky thing about Blender is even though all these things are selected, because this little thing in orange is, well, whatever is orange is what Blender's actually looking at. So if I want to look at my wall, you have to kind of click it, or yeah, because whatever's in orange is usually the active object that Blender's looking at, which gets kind of difficult sometimes. I'm sorry if this isn't helping anyone. So let's move this up, move this out. And there are multiple ways to polymodel. So let's say I don't want my bed to have these sharp corners. If I go into edit mode and then we select this. I forgot, you can't do that. Okay. So we selected the top of our bed and we don't want these sharp edges. We want to bevel them. So it can edit multiple edges at once. Sometimes topology gets a little bit weird if I like bevel this and then bevel a different side. I'm not a topology expert, but to bevel, you do Control B, and then you drag. So if you drag super far, things get like super funky. This is also kind of one of those things where you want your cursor to be a little bit far away. There's our point of origin, so Control B. And if you look at this and you're like, oh, that's too boxy, I don't want it like that, if you scroll your wheel, you can add a bunch of subdivisions. So like, let's say I like that roundness, but I'd like it maybe a little bit less. And then to apply anything, you do left click. So as you can see, our bed is nice and round now. So like, let's say we have that. Let's say we want a pillow. Make sure you're out of edit mode. Shift A. And let's use another cube. Wow, who would have thought? Oh, also, if you're like stuck in an access or like it's not snapping how you want it to, and you want to like change positions, but you don't want to apply, or I mean, again, you could apply it and then undo it with Control Z, or you can just press Escape. That's personal preference. Uh, Scaling on Z. So let's make a little pillow. Bring it down. That's a large pillow. I don't want it that large, so let's do SY. Bring it in a little bit. It's still too tall. SZ again. Look, we have a little blocky pillow. So uh, let's say I wanted to move this bed. Oop, I'm still in edit mode. Let's say I want to move this bed, but I also want to move the pillow. So there's several ways to do it. You can just select both items and then you can move it. But if you want the objects to be like the same object, there's a few different ways to do it. So the first way you can do it is Control J, and then it immediately joins those objects, but they retain their initial meshes. So like, I mean, this is gonna get a little funky. So like, I mean, they're just kind of together, but what Control J does is it puts those objects together, but it retains the topology of both. So if I had, let's say, Shift A, let's say there's a ball on the bed. So if I put in a UV sphere, like, I don't know, basketball or whatever, not to scale. So if you look, you see how the little sphere kind of boops into the bed. If I then join it to this bed object, it will remain, so the topology will remain inside of the bed. If you do not want that to happen, let me just undo, wait, actually, let's put that back. Oh, Lord. Oh, no, I selected a different object. Okay, so let's say I wanted this to be added, but I didn't really care, or I don't want that extra topology down inside of it. Another kind of fancy thing in Blender is this fancy modifiers tab. Now this is getting into a little bit more advanced territory because if you look at modifiers, there's a crap ton of modifiers. The ones that you mostly care about are, where is it? It's in Generate. So subdivision surface is really helpful for box modeling, and also mirror is helpful if you're, if you have a complicated mesh that you don't want to sculpt both sides on. And also it's the Boolean. So Boolean's kind of funky. It immediately puts it on difference. If you're trying to unify two things, you do union, and then it'll have what object do you want. I find it easiest to use the eyedropper, mostly because my files usually have a lot of objects. And if you don't name your objects, you won't know which cube it is. So it's easier sometimes just to do, oh, cube 4. Now, you'll see it kind of has this super weird, like, oh, what's this weird anti-aliasing happening on it? That's because Boolean non-destructively adds things to it. So even if I apply this Boolean, you see it doesn't go away. And that's because Boolean tool, or the Boolean modifier, makes a duplicate of the object that you're merging it with. I like that a little bit better than just merging and then kind of like sculpting things together, because I still have that original shape. So if I need to make an edit to that shape, I can. It's just a nicer process for me because there is a lot of back and forth in 3D. So there's that. So let's say this person has a bowl. They have a really nice bowl that I want to add in. So there's a few ways to do it. Let's see if I remember. Okay, so the easiest way that I found to do it is to do a mesh, do your UV sphere, and the nice thing about UV spheres, or any mesh that you plop down in Blender, is you can choose how high or low poly it is. But if you move it or do anything, this immediately disappears. So it's kind of easy to miss, especially because it doesn't actually pop up straight away. So let's say I want uh, let's do 12 rings, and we don't want it being super high poly, so let's do 12 by 12. Uh, no, let's do like 20. So an easy way to do a bowl is, let's say that's what I want. Let's make it a little bit smaller because it's a bowl, it's not that big. I'm also gonna get rid of, so if you want to get rid of this kind of workspace that you have, all you have to do is kind of hover on that little like median area and then your cursor will change. Right click again, join area. So like, let's say I wanted to join these two areas. Oh wait, okay. It'll kind of show you what the box will look like. So like, let's say I want to get rid of this. You just left click over whatever box you want it to become, and then bam, it just combines. So like, let's say I want to get rid of this one. Now we're back to our one view. So anyways, back to bowls. I find it easiest to put myself on the y-axis, and you might be going, oh, that's weird, why are you doing that? These are also some helpful important tools. So this little like double box thing, it's called toggle x-ray. And this is important if you're trying to like select multiple things at once. So the weird thing about Blender is you can select all the way through an object. So like that's selected. But if the X-ray tool is not on and I select this, it only selects the half that I see. This is not true for all tools on Blender. It just kind of depends on which tool you're using, which is super confusing sometimes. Let's say I only wanted this edge loop selected. So like, let's say I want this one to be bigger. So as you can see, I selected that entire ring. Sometimes edge loop selection is kind of weird. So the way I did that is I held Alt and then I clicked. If you click a vertice, sometimes it works, but sometimes it goes in a direction you don't want it to. So I find it easier just to Alt and then click that kind of cross section that I'm going for. So that's one way to do it. But for making bowls, X-ray tool and then selecting is your friend. This is another instance of it doesn't matter which one we select. Vertices is usually the fastest way. So as you can see, we have a bowl now, but it's still a little bit funky. It's not exactly what we're looking for. So a few more edits you can make that are super fast is go back into X-ray mode. Whatever vertices, like whatever you want the bottom of your bowl to be, select under that edge loop that you want, and then press SZ0, and that immediately flattens your bowl. And so let's say I wanted this rung to actually be the section that I want as my bottom. You can just G and move it up. And then there you go, you have the bottom of the bowl. But oh no, your bowl is still 2D. Well, it's not as thick as you want it to be. So, a super easy way to sort of add thickness to something, like if you modeled like a cup or something that's supposed to have thickness but doesn't have a thickness and it's just, these kind of flat polygons. Blender has you covered. So another way to do it is to add modifier. You want to generate a solidify modifier. So that's this one right here. And if you ever like don't know like, oh, I don't know if it's in physics or like where it is, if you just open the modifier tab and this pops up and you start typing, so like solidify, oh, there's my solidify. And then you just click it or you press enter, depending on which one it is. So this might look super weird, but as you can see, it has a tiny bit of thickness now. So this is the computer thinking just kind of on its own. So this is negative. If you make it positive, no, go back. Wait, okay. So you can't control Z edits you make in this, just as a weirdness. So like, let's say I want to make it 1. Now you see that put that on the outside. So if you're trying to put it on the outside, use a positive number. If you're wanting it inside, do a -1. And then, so this means this is just your thickness editor. So if like I wanted it like not that thick, like let's say I wanted it that thick. Bam, now you have a bowl. Now sometimes solidify and subdivision hide like just the topology and the way that object is moving in space. It can hide these little nodes sometimes, so that's another use where this is useful. Like, for example, if I push this side in, oh, never mind. There's some instances where sometimes you can't see nodes for some reason, and that's where this view or sometimes the wire mesh view works. But if you have something that's like super high poly or you have a lot of polygons in your scene, this can sometimes be a little bit more confusing. So I'm still in X-ray mode. Let's exit X-ray mode. And look, now you have a little bowl. Let's say you don't want your little bowl to look this polygonal. Another way to kind of fix that is if you do add, generate, and then you go into subdivision. So subdivision generally makes things a little bit smoother. So as you can see, there's a lot more kind of polygons going around, but you want to be careful with how many subdivisions on the subdiv modifier that you add, because that's your computer thinking, oh, I have to add this many polygons. Now, there is a bit of a way around that. So as you can see, this number is 1, whereas this number is 2. So again, renders your output. So the actual rendered output of this object is currently double of what we're seeing. And if you're ever curious about what it's seeing, then you can just up it to the same number. But if you're sitting on, say, I want to save some computer thinking, you can just set it to 1 in your viewport. But when you go into render and you render image or animation, then your computer will actually do the thinking and show this 2. So this is a lot higher poly. Computer has to do a lot of thinking. If you have a beefy computer, it's probably not gonna like freak out and chug a whole bunch. But if you're not sure, try and keep it lower subdivisions. So let's say I want to make something more advanced. Like, what if they have a table? So you kind of have to think a little bit more about the construction of how you're doing a table. I'm sorry if I run a little bit long. So the easiest way that I think about it is, what is the main shape I'm trying to achieve? So if you think about it, a table has a square and then it has like cylinders for legs. So the best way to start with it is, I find it easiest to start with the greatest mass. So I will start with our cube. So let's say it's right here. I don't want it that large. So let's do SZ again. Kind of scale it so it's like one of those little cute box tables. It's still too long. So SY to make sure I'm doing that. Oop. And then let's move it back a little bit. Let's make it a little bit taller. Move it over a little bit. You know, you want to put your little bowl on it. There you go. So as you can see, sometimes when you're looking at something, you can move it and be like, yeah, that's on your object. Whereas if you go into the y-axis or the top axis, you actually see it's not. So when you're trying to put objects onto another specific area of an object, I find it easiest to sort of do top view, get it set there, and then go sort of, so like, I know this is centered on the table where I want it to come down, so all I do is just G and then drag it down on that X or Z axis. And then sometimes you have to fiddle around and be like, yeah, that looks like it's set. So there you go, now you got your bowl on your table. Now this table's missing legs. Oh no, it's going to fall over. Let's get some legs on it. Let's not edit our bowl. Shift A, mesh. I'm gonna use a cylinder for this. And I'm gonna make it, yeah, we don't need that many vertices. Let's do like 8. There we go. And then scale it, move it. Oh, also, if you ever have an object that you don't want to see, like, I'm trying to get this leg in here and this this wall is in our way. One thing you can do is you can just turn it off. So these eyeballs are everything that's viewable. So if you have like an object and it's like absolutely in your way, you just be like, goodbye. And even if I forget to turn it back on, so this camera option is in render. So it'll render it even though I'm not seeing it right now. And so like let's say I have another object that I want to see just to make sure it's like placed right, but I don't want it rendered. Then you just do the opposite, or you can do both. I've used it a lot both ways. So getting our little cylinder in there. Looks a little bit big still. Let's do small. Now our floor's in the way. Goodbye, Mr. Floor. For now. So as you can see, it takes a little bit of finagling to kind of get where you want. Also, if you want to quickly check like opposite views, you can just click. So like if I'm on X and I want to view the other side of X really quickly, bam, you just click it again. I'm sorry if I'm making anyone motion sick with that. So going back to editing our little guy. There you go. Now he's nice in there. So now he's a little bit short. Let's fix that. X-ray mode. Just select that bottom. Oh no, we need the floor again. Oh no, where's my floor? Oh no, I didn't name it. Please name your objects. It will save you time. And then just kind of extrude him down. If you don't care about like, I mean, if you want to make sure your object is like set in the scene and it's not floating weirdly, you can just extrude it down. You can also just extrude it through the floor. If it's super important that it doesn't like go through the floor for you, you can also do different like snap modes. So like, if I wanted to snap it to the face, I can snap it to the face and it will not do its job. Okay. There's a lot of options you can kind of play with. So it's like face project or face nearest. So if I wanted to, okay, you know what? We're not gonna, oh wait, it wasn't on. Oh, look, there you go. Now it's snapping. So if I want it just to go straight down, I can just middle mouse click that and then there you go. No guesswork. It is attached to that. So like, let's say you wanted a little bit more finesse to this little leg here. If you want to add any edge loops, so any like circles that go around it, so you can edit those a little bit. If you have the object selected, or you don't even need it selected, you just need to be in edit mode, Control R. So you see this little yellow thing appears. It's like bevel, so if I want like 60 of them, I can just like pump my mouse wheel just up super high. So like let's say I just want one. When you left click, it'll ask you where you want to put that. So like let's say I want like a weird little bump here. You move it to where you want it to go and you left click. It's also kind of the same as moving objects when you duplicate them. If I don't want that to move, so like let's say I want a middle one right here, and I accidentally move my mouse, just right click again and it applies. And you don't have to do anything about that. So if I want this to be kind of like a funky little leg, there's that. Let's say this is a little bit high up and I don't want it to be that high up. You can also just G and then move it. And you can also move them this way or that way. But if you're if you're trying to make like a normal straight leg, I would highly recommend just snapping it to that axis so you don't get any weirdness. So there's our little leg. And I'm not going to go over mirror modifier because mirror modifiers get a little bit complicated, but let's say I want to just duplicate it. Just, oh, no, Shift D. There you go. Just move it across there. And also just Shift D them again. Move them to the back. And there you go. You have a table with weird little legs and weird little hoof looking things. Also, let's say I want this table to have, you know, like a little drawer in it. The easiest way that I find to kind of deal with stuff like that is you want to select the the vertices around the face you want. Let's say I want it to be inset a little bit. So I want this to be, the same distance from every corner there is. And edge loops aren't going to get you that result. I mean, you could edge loop the hell out of it, but it's not going to be as precise. There is actually I forget what it's called, but you press I and it's the same thing, so you can drag it. So like let's say I want it, I think it's called an inset. So like I want that much of an inset. Yeah, inset face. And then all I have to do is, so this is a time when so like if you look and I move that in and it gets a little bit funky, uh it's because these nodes are moving, or these little vertices are moving, and it's just saying, oh hey, this is moving back and I'm attached to this vertice, so I'm going to move back with you. This is a time when extrusion is helpful. So as you can see, it extruded back in. Now extrusions, when you're pushing something into itself, gets really, really funky. For faces that are inset, I haven't had any issues with it, but like if I had, let's say, let's make a tube. Let's see. Cylinder. So like, bam, I have a cylinder. And I don't want you to be this tall, but I extrude it, as you can see. Because it's not inset or anything, the vertices are like, oh, I need to move inward. So it has some funkiness if you extrude without insets and stuff. Is there any object anyone has a question about, or like a question about building an object? Because there's a lot of ways you can manipulate the basic shapes you're given to create an output you desire. I hope this was helpful. I'm sorry, I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants because I wasn't super sure what people would find helpful. And it's kind of one of those things where it just becomes muscle memory. So it's like I might have missed a lot of stuff because I just don't think about it. Because doing Blender go burr. And I did completely like skirt over a lot of stuff because it's a lot of like, what do you need to accomplish this look you're looking for or wanting? So it's super weird. How do you make a hole without breaking the mesh? Uh that's a super kind of weird question. So are you talking about like if you wanted to make like say a window in something like this? Or like what are you trying to put a hole in is my question. Uh do you mean like shift? Oh, like a hole in the table, like if I actually wanted this to be like an inset hole? I mean, a super simple way to do that is to kind of just it depends a lot on your topology. So you're gonna have to like really think about the topology you're doing. But like if I wanted just this to be just like a straight like hole in it, I could just extrude it like super far back. Or if you're like, I mean, you could just delete. This is the part where you would dissolve. No wait, I'd just delete the face. Hold on. There. And then you can kind of just see inside it. But as you can see, that completely, like, there's nothing in here. So I mean, it's kind of like those case by case things where it's like you sort of have to think about how you're doing something. Like if I wanted to add kind of like a hole in this, or like I didn't want a drawer appearance, I just wanted it to be like straight through, I would just go straight through. Or I'd just extrude it as far back as I could. And that's where your drawing skills would come in handy when you get to like rendering it, you know? Um, I I don't think it's not necessary to hold shift when you're, so like when I'm scaling something, it automatically scales it to be like it's always proportional. And then holding shift makes it like a little bit more precise, whereas like as you can see this is going crazy, whereas if I hold shift it's a little bit more tame. Um when you're navigating, if you're sculpting, I've found that Blender gets a little bit like I have, for reference, I use a Wacom Intuos Pro. It's not a screen tablet. When I'm in sculpt mode, oh, don't crash, don't crash. Okay. When I'm in sculpt mode and I have like a brush out, one really annoying thing I've found with using like a pen tablet to get around is if you bring your stylus up here, because these are sliders, so you can, like, I'm mouse clicking this. Um, I don't have my pen tablet plugged in right now, but what it'll do is for some reason it thinks it's more of like a click, like a left mouse click, instead of like a like click and drag with the stylus. So it'll just open it like this and then you're like, "Oh no, I can't edit it." And it's really funky. But in terms of like node editing, like here, let me see if I can get mine plugged in real fast. So like let's say I wanted to edit the bowl. Are you on, Mr. Tablet? Hello, wake up. Uh oh, yeah, I have that same issue. I'm sure it could be just one of my settings. So like this is my tablet. Like I can't edit a point, um, because it doesn't detect you, like, you know how in Photoshop where like you drag and it just draws for you. When you're like sculpting on an object, it notices that and it understands, oh, this is a brush being used. But like in point editing, like I can't move these. It also might just be a me issue. You'd have to troubleshoot that. But I haven't found out a way to use the pen to sort of, oh, well, I mean, I have my right click programmed into it, but that's like a, you'd have to figure that out. The Monty ones might be a little bit different because they are actually screen tablets. Does also, uh any modifier that does create, so like for example, this is creating geometry. If I oh wait, hold on. Okay, so you can't apply modifiers if you're in edit mode. But say you want to apply it, you just click this button and then you apply it. And if it adds geometry, so like the or solidify was giving me this thickness, it'll actually give you kind of those notes. So like if I wanted to make it kind of more an irregular thickness, you can go in and you can hand edit that, just so it's a little bit, funky, has more personality. Does anyone else have any questions or anything that they would like to see made? Also, if you want something that's like off kilter, so like everything in this room is pretty, samey. Let's say I wanted to rotate this. So the easiest way I find, if I'm going, like, I don't really care, but I only want it rotated in, like, say this direction, go into the top view and then like rotate it how you want. Sometimes you'll see these add like 0.002 or something if your movement isn't precise. You can just change those back to 0, but then you can move it. The only issue is now, like, if I wanted to move, say, this, hold on, let me go back. So, like, let's say I wanted to move this, like, straight across. It gets a little bit funky, and I can't use the axis anymore because this is off kilter, so now it wants to move on just the straight x-axis. So be careful when you're making props. Importing and posing a figure, so there's a lot of things that go into that. One, the figure you're importing has to have a rig, so that means it has to have a skeleton bone structure for you to edit that. But my understanding is once you have that imported and you have sort of that object rigged, um, it's hard to explain, but like when you're in the bone structure, you're able to move, like you're able to click like that ball joint and you're able to move it just like an object, is my understanding. I haven't rigged anything. Another way to do it is uh that doesn't involve like editing things like that is in sculpt mode. So like let's say you had your human figure in here. There's something called a pose brush, and you can kind of, if the bones are in there, I think you're able to move it with that. But that comes with like a lot of things like, oh, if you're moving it, like say you move the arm and the polygons deform in a weird way, then you'd have to go in and edit the weight paints, and then that gets into weight painting. Um, so that's something you probably have to research on your own time. Because rigs are an entirely different section I haven't touched because of how sometimes advanced they get and stuff. But there's definitely a lot of tutorials out there for rigging and like moving rigs and stuff like that. If that's everyone's questions, then I guess meeting adjourned unless someone has questions or concerns. Multiple people are typing. Yeah, I'm glad it helped people. I hope it helped kind of demystify getting into 3D because I know it's a lot of stuff that sometimes overwhelms people. So I hope this kind of helped you get that foot through that. Oh no, 3D is terrifying. I've been told it's a lot easier to move around in Blender than Maya. Like, you were talking about all these buttons you had to push to do something, and I was like, oh my gosh, that, how, it's a lot of buttons.
Based off watching you do this, I feel like Blender is an easier starter.
That's what
Like
I've
it's still
heard.
confusing to me to watch, but it was less confusing than how Maya first looked.
Yeah, I've done the Maya tutorial, and it's like I can't imagine just like doing more advanced stuff in it, cause like all I had to do was like position a model and then export renders from it. Um, but Maya is a little bit more powerful than Blender, though I would say, because it's. I feel like the fabric physics is a lot more robust. You can do them in Blender. It just takes a lot more research to get, I think, the same output. Whereas, I mean, I guess with Maya you also have to put that research in, but it's also I feel like made to handle that in a different way. It's weird. It's like comparing apples to oranges, but the apples to oranges are very similar, you know?
Yeah. I was thinking because next week I'm gonna do the Maya tutorial with more stuff. So, do you think it'd be a good idea if I like put out like just an announcement asking if anybody has suggestions of what they want to see or questions they have ahead of time so that I can kind of build that in?
Yeah. The main thing with that though is you might get some questions about like 1.0 stuff we went over. Uh I mean, I guess it wouldn't hurt to go over them again. Um I don't know. See, that's like the hard question is because I'm so used to like just throwing stuff in a scene. Um because I can generally understand like, oh, I need I need to make this and then I need to make this and then connect those and all that stuff. Like it's hard for me to think about like what people need. But I figured a bowl and adding objects and then like moving polygons was a good place to start.
Yeah. I don't know, because I was also thinking, like, should I show because like I think you touched on like the deform type stuff in Blender, but there's also like the deform stuff in Maya. So should I go into like more technical stuff like that, or should I do a bunch of examples of how you could use the basic tools to do different things? Because that might be more helpful for people who just want to block out stuff.
Oh god, you could do it both ways. I guess it would just depend on like what you want to focus on, cause like there's so much stuff in both Blender and Maya. Like I didn't even touch on like cloth physics or like mirror modifiers or mirroring things across a null object or even what a null object is. So it's like uh it's up to you to prioritize like what you want to focus on. Um I don't know, cuz you could also like dive into niche things like how do you make cards? How do you do fabric physics, stuff like that. But
Yeah, that could be good.
it's also like such a niche case by case basis. Like here, let me see if I can open this with oh god.
What?
Here, let's put a true test on my computer of can it open this.
I don't see any free time in my near future, but I think over the summer I want to try the donut tutorial again.
If you're looking for blockout stuff, like you don't need to go into like the sprinkled geometry nodes, although the weight painting part of that I found helpful. Oh, Blender. I can't scroll in. Oh, it's thinking. Oh, wait. No. Wait, I'm not in render mode. So, a more advanced sort of Blender thing, for those of y'all who are still here, let my let my Blender catch up a little bit. So this is a larger file. So this is kind of a more advanced demonstration of like what you can do in Blender. So as you can see, this is a very advanced shape. It has a lot of subdivisions. You can see the UV seams on it. So these red things are the UV seams on him. He has. Oh, it did not like that. Uh oh. So as you can see, the heavier file your file is in Blender, the like angrier it gets. But like these are photo textures with like custom displacement maps and stuff. Like hold on. Let me see if I disappear. If I disappear, Blender Christ. I'm trying to run. Hold on. So like with Blender, you can do a lot of like funky stuff. So like uh from the Pip Pip, the little like orange bird creature, I was told my feathers didn't look organic enough or like feathery enough. So I actually for this one, it might be hard to see, but it's like they go up and down and they look a little bit more organic, and that's because I used a custom like bump map which deforms the mesh. It's weird. So it's like it moves points of the mesh based on values of an object, like a texture map you put in. Um, so like you can do that. I'm trying to think. Oh, also another kind of funky thing you can play with. So like if you look at his eyes, they're like glossy as fuck, whereas like the saddle and stuff is more matte. And that's like a super simple thing. So this is something I didn't show because I didn't want people's brains to blow up. But if you go into uh, is it? Oh, it's not bound. Okay, it is shader editor. So when you want to throw like custom texture, like custom hand painted texture maps and stuff on, you have to make it a material. I don't have 40 materials in this. I don't know why it says 40. But you can also name these. So like if I want to name this like uh bird board. I would highly recommend naming stuff. This just means this is used on 12 different objects. You can also choose to unlink it with, yeah, unlink data block. I actually got really confused with this because I had too many things linked to each other, and then some things were linked to parts, but other parts weren't linked to that part. It was kind of a mess. But you can play with like the glossiness, so like if I wanted it super matte, I can make it super matte. I can make it super glossy. I can make it like super metallic, or uh like I don't know, just like plasticky, I guess is what you would call that. Um, but the cool thing is if you like get into sculpting, where is it? Give me that body. So this detail actually is not applied. Uh, well, okay, it looks like it's applied because I baked the normal map, but like these parts get really funky and weird because it's like, oh, we're 3D, but it's like a 2D texture. So like the little tufts just like don't work unless you actually have the sculpted multi-res on. Blender. But this is like, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff you can do with sculpting, but I wouldn't start with it because like I had to download custom alpha maps for this. Like I bought brushes just for this, and then you have to like apply them, and then you have to worry about like, do I use did topo or do I use multi-res, and then that's a whole discussion. But it's fun once you get into it and sort of like once you understand it. Like I actually wish I sculpted my Pip Pip like this. So I think I actually have like the old head files in here. Let me exit edit mode. Exit. Uh, I'm sorry if this is boring. I can't help Blender's load times. So let's see. Old, just turn this on. Yeah, so as you can see, this was the old head I was working with. And then I was gonna do the same thing where I like sculpted the body separate. But then I looked at my concept art's broken. I looked at my concept art and I was like, in order to get him to be like this smooth, I have to sculpt him as one thing. So like, um, I mean, if you want to see like here, let's do a new. Let's don't save that. I should have gone over this in the demo when everyone was here. But like the really cool thing is you can start like super simple. So like if I wanted to do the same thing, I could do subdivision. And it's kind of weird. So if you just want the faces to be unchanged but be subdivided, you can just do simple. But this actually like changes the shape of it, which is super fun. Uh so like it's still a square, but it's not viewed as a square. But if I applied this, then it wouldn't be a square. But like the super fun thing, so what I did to do that is you can actually like extrude these and then it does things. So like if I extruded this and then I rotate that and then I move it this way and then I extrude it again, like you can start building like super. Oh, wait, hold on. I first pitfall. Didn't use shake my head. Didn't use x-ray mode. You have to select everything or it's not happy. So like look at that, and now it's just a little log, and then now you can rotate your log, and then now you can extrude it again, and you can rotate it again, you can extrude it, you can move it, and you can rotate it. And then like let's say I want this to be out more. You could just like beef it up, or like you could select the edge loop and like make it bigger. Like poly modeling is super fun. Like it's for my brain. I found it easier to poly model than just go straight into sculpting because sculpting is kind of scary to me.
I
Uh,
haven't really touched it yet.
okay, just select that
I've
face.
only modeled.
But see, like even though that's like super fast, like I mean this is like pretty similar to what I did for that. But it's like it's topology is like such an important thing to 3D. I understand next to nothing of it, which is why I don't recommend starting with sculpting because you have to, like, if you get so many subdivisions, to optimize your file, you have to, like, make it polygon friendly so it's not like 6,000 polygons. And to do that, you have to retopologize it. But to retopologize it, you can use like a retopo add-on or something. Like there's even like sold models that uh you can use, and it has like super nice topology. Blenders is okay. I personally don't like it. It actually kind of ruined my second project, but that's probably because I was just dumb and didn't understand what I was doing. But figuring out like retopologizing stuff is like it's awful, which is why I polymodel instead of sculpt. But if you wanted to add like little leggies, uh, you could do. I don't even remember how it. See, like, so this is what I was talking about, where like it's subdivided, but you can't see the thingies because the subdivision is making it do other things. Uh, so like I don't know, it's weird. But like, let's say I wanted to do little leggies, I could do this and then extrude it. Uh, it's weird because it's like, oh wait, I think actually the way I did it is I did this, and because I'm a heathen, I just selected. Can you select the face? Thank you. I think yeah, I think I did this because I'm dumb and I don't understand anything else. So like, what I did is that, and then I extruded them down, and then you got legs, kinda. I wouldn't recommend doing it that way. There's smarter ways to do it.
Honestly, if it works, it works.
Yeah. I will say the topology on my second model is probably not as bad uh as the other one. Another like super weird way I've seen people do it is, hold on, let me get exit mode. So another way to do it, which is how I did the ears on my second one. Don't try and model an ear with your cube. Oh my god, it's so terrible. People sometimes just use planes and then like uh let me rotate it. Oh, yeah. I'm that dumb kid who has to like figure out which axis it's supposed to be rotated on. But like one way to do it is you sit in like vertex mode and then you just like extrude and you like extrude and then like I don't want to take up too much time, so you just do that and then you like bring it down. And then like let's say I want this front not to be as like extreme, and then like let's say I want this to poke out a little bit more and then this to, I don't know, uh do that. Look, it's generally ear shapes, and I didn't have to like think about how a cube rotates in space. That the difference between the ears of my two models is crazy. But all you have to do then is you just have to solidify it, and then it's like, wow, you have an ear. And then if you want to do something extra, you can subdivide it. I actually kind of prefer if my subdivision is above my solidify. I don't know. There's like the order of your modifiers matters. Like, I don't know. For ears, I kind of prefer this, and then it's like I'll just up my solidify so it's a little bit bigger, like that. And then like for super fine edits, I'll just wait. I'm in edit mode. I'll just apply it, and then like let's say I want this to be a little bit inward. Uh, like I'll even go as far sometimes as like select the face and then like rotate it inwards, just so it's like a little bit more, I don't know, organic or something. Uh, there's just so many ways to do stuff. It's weird.
It's interesting that your modifiers are like actively editable. Like you can, they're not just permanent when you do them. Because I'm pretty sure that's, I don't think there's something like that in Maya.
Oh,
I
you
could be wrong.
you mean like it can like sit like here?
Yeah, and like how you could drag them and change like edit them.
Oh, dude, okay, so the order of your stuff really matters. So like let me go back to my other file. Wait for it to open. So, I actually didn't know. So I booleaned in some oh, load. Load please. So like for his little belt right here, it's like a belt buckle and it's like if you have a belt buckle, you have to have like the holes for the little like prong thing. I don't know what to call the anatomy of a belt buckle. So if you look here, they're actually nice looking circles, right? If I actually put the subdivision below the booleans, look how like messed up they get. Like there's like weird, like look at that, it's ugly. Like this one's not even a circle, this one's having issues. So it's like if you're running into weird topology things and you have active modifiers, like sometimes just like, oh look, that fixed it. And it's like super weird to think that I don't know, subdivision does some funky stuff when it's not in the proper order. But it's a fun rabbit hole, but if you're like trying to crunch stuff, it's not a fun rabbit hole. Cause I had 3 weeks each for both of my sculpting projects, and it was like it takes longer than you think. Cause I was like, oh, it's only gonna take 2 weeks, and then I'll just have like a week to do the texture maps and hand texture everything, and it was very much not. I spent most of it sculpting because it's all that like little node manipulation. Like, I'm sure there's better way to do belts. Um, but like if you look, so this one I actually applied uh the solidify modifier, but if you look at like these ones, uh yeah, like they're the solidify modifier is still there. And I mean, I could move the solidify under the subdiv, but I don't like how blocky that looks. Oh, never mind. That actually kind of solved the issue I had with some of the belts. Ah, god damn it. The more you know. But these were actually like kind of a nightmare. So what I did is I literally sat in vertex mode with this little like uh to face and then face project, and I had to like hand move them. Oh, I might just crash my blender. But like there's so many ways to do it. Like there's so many ways to do belts, but I was too lazy to do anything else. So I actually probably spent more time making these because I was like, I'd move like this one. I'd be like, oh, this one has to go. This one has to go there, so it looks like a belt. And I'm sure, oh, yeah, they snap to the feet. And I know there's so many add-ons to Blender too, but those add like an extra thing of complexity because then you have to like install them and then you have to figure out like how to use them. Like Bool Tool just comes with it, and I know it would have made my life easier, but it's like that's another thing to the list of oh god, I have to learn this, so I didn't. Oh, but also a fun thing, he's actually entirely mirrored, minus his legs, I think. Uh oh, what am I editing? Get out of that. So like, oh wait, okay. So I actually applied his mirror because he needed it, but like his legs are entirely mirrored, and I don't know, it's just a lot of weird stuff you can do. Anyways, with that, that's the intro to Blender and extras.